this Open University discussion to mark the launch of its new Trends in Learning report. Each year, experts at the Open University identify the latest innovations in learning and development. The report gives an overview of these trends alongside analysis from L&D practitioners. Joining me today are the OU's Agnes Kukulska-Hulme, who leads the team that identifies the trends, and Simon Tindall, who works with employers to address skills challenges through OU Learning. Welcome both. So, firstly, Simon, the Open University is well known for changing the lives of individuals, but it also works with employers and other organisations. Why is this such an important part of its work?
It's become an increasingly significant part of the work. We have over 1,300 employers that have chosen to use our learning solutions as part of their L&D strategies. And that includes over 3/4 of the FTSE 100 companies, as well as major programs within public sector and third-party organisations. It's generally not just that traditional model of employer sponsorship of people doing degrees and apprenticeships, but it's also employers looking to utilise our free open learn offering of courses, as well as working with us to build additional new content. And also, it's not just companies or employers looking to focus just on their employees. I think increasingly you're seeing companies reach out to a wider community area. So quite often they are interested in talking to us about their customer base, about their local community, about people coming into the organisation as job seekers as well.
So a really broad range of approaches there. So would it be fair to say that the OU has always been a trendsetter in education?
Yeah, I mean, we have been in the distance learning business for over 50 years. We were probably the first organisation to come into that area and that way of delivering education. And it's been part of our sort of remit and ambition to always remain on the leading edge of utilising technology and new practices to continue to offer highly effective training and education. So, you can look at the adoptions from moving from a postal distance learning provision through to CDs, through to the internet, onto mobile, etc., as this continual progression of stages of utilising education to deliver at scale and fulfil the social remit of the OU.
Great, thank you. So Agnes, can you tell us a bit about the origins of this report and how the trends are identified?
Yes, the report is based on the annual report that the Open University produces called Innovating Pedagogy. And really what we're trying to do with this report is to highlight the pedagogical innovations that either we are working on ourselves or that we have been researching and have become aware of. So, as Simon said, the Open University has been at the forefront of innovations in pedagogy over the past 50 years. But back in 2012, when we started up this report series, we wanted to raise the profile of what we had been doing in our research and in our practice, and make it more visible, share it more widely with others who would benefit. We also were very aware that trends that are identified are often technology driven. So they come from the introduction of new technologies. And we wanted actually to balance that with an approach that was more focused on the teaching and learning and assessment aspects. So combining the use of new technologies with very well-grounded pedagogical practice based on evidence. So just to also explain how we identify the trends in our reports. it's very much a collaborative effort. There's a team of colleagues working together. We always have also an external partner that we engage in our efforts. And we go through an exciting process of researching, reading widely to see what has come up in terms of innovations, assessing the evidence, how strong is the research evidence or the evidence from practice. And then we produce a long list of possibilities, long list of innovations that we could potentially describe. And we look at the extent to which there is good evidence that these innovations work or that they have potential. And then we work on that long list, produce descriptions, and then actually assess what's in front of us and select 10 innovations for the next report. And we do that by voting on those innovations.
Great. So which particular trends did you work on yourself?
So for the latest report, I worked on best learning moments and also on the use of chatbots in learning. The best learning moments are a very interesting approach that is also known as optimal learning moments. And I think I got very interested in it because it connects well with work that I've done in the past and currently I'm doing on mobile learning, where we're very interested in the way that people use their time throughout the day, accessing content or interacting with others on their mobile device, perhaps capturing their experiences on their mobile device. And therefore, we pay a lot of attention to moments throughout the day when people are learning. So naturally, we tend to ask ourselves, what are the best learning moments? And so I think this approach, which has been used in various disciplines, really resonated with me. I think it's very interesting because it makes us reflect on our state of mind and our readiness to learn. You know, how ready are we? How prepared are we to learn at any given time? And also it draws attention to our enjoyment of the learning experience, which is very important. Our ability to concentrate on learning at any given time. And this seemed to also connect with current discussions, of course, during the pandemic, about people's ability to concentrate, to focus on learning, how able are they to find appropriate moments during the day in which to learn. So that really seemed to be something that tapped into current concerns. The examples from that area come from, for example, medical staff learning more effectively when they're interacting with patients rather than out of context. So studies report that the best learning moment for the medical practitioner might be when they're learning something from their interaction with the patient. And in terms of the chatbots piece, I think that one is very interesting because it's making use of increasingly everyday technologies, so things that we use in daily life, such as Alexa or Siri or Google Assistant on our phones or on our home devices. So it's using those kinds of tools, but also then backing that up with research on how we learn through conversations. How do we talk to a chatbot? Most people encounter them on their on a website where a chatbot pops up and says, "Can I help you?" and you have a small conversation with the chatbot. But that brings in this whole issue of how we learn through conversation, and what are the best kinds of conversations for learning, and what purposes they serve, whether it's problem solving or reflection or whether it's to answer people's questions in a prompt fashion. And then it also connects with issues of how you support people when they are in difficulty and they need their questions answered. So, for example, their difficulties might be, again, linking back to best learning moments, their mental state, not able to get over a learning barrier, and maybe a conversation with a chatbot can help them get over that. So these notions are actually quite interlinked, and I think both are very interesting trends.
So that's great, Agnes. I noticed that gratitude was one trend in the report, and I thought that kind of stood out as being really interesting. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so we refer to this as gratitude as a pedagogy. So it's obviously building on the feelings, the emotions that you experience when you're grateful for an experience. But it's trying to take that a little bit further and thinking about how you build that into the teaching and learning. So it's about recognizing your feelings towards perhaps the learning or the teacher or the subject, actually recognizing your feelings and your attitude and working with that. Either if it's a positive attitude, then building on those positive feelings, or if you have some negative feelings, then how can those be turned around? And that approach really helps people to focus and to concentrate on learning, helps them in the long term to overcome the barriers or difficulties that they experience in relation to their learning. It sort of creates a state of preparedness, prepares people for the experience of learning. So it seems to have a lot of traction in that regard. And there are many ways in which technology, again, can help with those processes of, first of all, recognizing that your feelings and recording them, and again, mobile devices can be used in that way. Perhaps a reflection prior to a learning experience, and also a reflection back on what happened in a learning scenario, and then reflecting back on it. So it's all about your emotions as you approach some learning, and then reflecting back on that, and making changes to your state of mind.
Yeah. Now, as you said, the OU's been researching these trends since 2012. So how have you seen some of these trends enter the mainstream over the last few years?
It's interesting to look back on what we've written about. So we started this series in 2012, and at that time, 2012, 13, 14, we were writing a lot about social learning. We were writing about MOOCs, which have become very popular over the years. We wrote about crowd learning, so approaches that are now very commonplace, for example, using Twitter as a learning platform, and Facebook, of course, as well. I think this whole area of social learning and crowd learning has become mainstream. Another trend that we wrote about all those years ago was learning analytics, that hardly anyone had heard about at the time. It was all about big data, but the phrase learning analytics hadn't yet been invented, I suppose. So that's when that came. That's how we. So we described that trend back in 2013, and also a few years later we described formative analytics as another take on learning analytics, and and a whole series of innovations around learning beyond the classroom. So, for example, seamless learning, where you try to connect different contexts seamlessly. Flipped classroom. The flipped classroom was described in 2014 and became very widely adopted subsequently. And also in the early days, we already had several entries around use of games for learning. So, for instance, learning with video games. And again, that approach has entered the mainstream since the early days.
Great. So, Simon, if I can bring you back in, since the start of the pandemic, do you feel employers are now more willing to try different approaches to learning? And do you have any examples of that?
I think a really interesting thing happened. I think during the pandemic, a lot of employers focused quite honestly elsewhere than learning and development. They really moved towards sort of short-term objectives of coping through the pandemic, of either business survival through to how best to operate in and thrive in a COVID world. The really interesting thing is, as lockdown has eased, then there's been a significant increase in businesses looking forward and longer term, and so much higher interest in subsequent interest in training. The impact of the lockdown of that 12-month period has probably also been a period of reflection for a lot of businesses, and so not only is that a sort of renewed interest, the very interesting thing is that there's also this desire to try something new and to a much more willingness to look at new approaches of sharing benefits and costs amongst other employers, for example. So we're already seeing programs that we have with the likes of Uber. We're seeing a strong interest in learning as a benefit type programs. We're seeing a lot of interest in employers revamping their existing internal learning platforms and content in new ways. So looking to utilize open content that's out there, particularly in areas like OpenLearn. In short, looking to do more with the same or less budget. And so finding different ways of doing things better, really. And I think when you couple that in with the underlying trends within learning, some of which that Agnes has mentioned, like modular learning and micro-credentials and those types of areas, and this movement towards portfolio learning, then it's definitely very exciting times.
And finally, Agnes, why is it so important for learning and development professionals to keep up to date with these trends and innovations?
It's important because I think learner expectations need to be met, and increasingly people are encountering very interesting learning experiences in their leisure pursuits, in their daily lives. New technologies are coming on stream. Artificial intelligence is becoming more integrated with our daily lives. So tools like chatbots are being used on a daily basis. So that forms people's expectations, and I think a lot of these trends that I've been talking about connect with people's daily experiences. And I think also, having highlighted the importance of emotions in learning, that also is something we should bear in mind, that in the current climate particularly, many people are in a fragile state, and they need to be supported more carefully. So different kinds of approaches may need to be tried out with the learners to see what works best. And I think that is something that's like a new driver for innovation, and that we're seeing just as a consequence of the pandemic. It's always been something important, but it's been highlighted in over the past year.
Interesting times. So, thanks to Agnes and Simon. That brings us to the end of a really interesting discussion. You can download the Trends in Learning report at the Open University's virtual stand at the Festival of Work. The team would love to talk to you about learning challenges, so make sure you visit the exhibition hall. And thanks again for joining us.